Welcome back to the shop. As you can see, the shop's a bit of a mess right now. I'm finishing up this walnut sideboard. I've kind of got parts all over the place. This is what the end of a project looks like before it all gets put back together. And that's what I'm going to be doing over the next 2 or 3 days. Putting everything back together, finishing up the video, finishing up the plans, and hopefully have everything ready by this time next week. In the meantime, if you didn't know, I started a new channel with Jeff and Rob from Greene Street Joinery right here in New Jersey. They're just about 15 minutes away from me. The channel is Today's Craftsmen. It's what we consider a woodworking channel by woodworkers for woodworkers. So really deep dives, long format videos on how things are done, especially in a professional business, which is what Greene Street Joinery is. So in this video, Jeff's going to take us along and show us how they build face frames in their shop. So I hope that you'll stick around and then go over to Today's Craftsmen, check out the follow-up video, and subscribe and like while you're there. And I think you're going to enjoy the content. So thanks for tuning in. Here's Jeff.
Welcome back to the shop. I'm Jeff from Today's Craftsmen. Today we are going to build a face frame. So we're building these 6 cabinets. I think we may have mentioned them in a previous video, and they're white oak. So they're plywood cabinets with white oak face frames and doors, as well as side panels. So we have our side panels already built, and we have our cabinet boxes built. So what we're going to do today is we're going to dry fit the panels, and we're going to figure out how big the face frame needs to be, and I'll show you how we make them. So we have a cabinet box here. I've already prepped the face frames for the other 3 cabinets. So this is the 4th cabinet. I prepped the other 3 before John got here. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our side panels. They go here and they finish flush with the front of this cabinet box, and then our face frame overlays. So to get the overall width of our face frame, we want to have those side panels here so we can get a nice accurate measurement. So what I'll do is I'll grab these side panels. I have them over here. Rob prepped these last week. So these are just 1-inch, white oak frame and panel, same way you would build a door. You might notice here we have a reduced style. That's because when our 1-inch face frame goes on top, we'll have 3 inches just like we have back here. So we have our 2 panels. Bring these over here. And you can see that these are actually longer than the cabinet box. So the top of this cabinet box will be flush with the top of this, and we're putting some casters on the bottom. So I'm going to clamp these panels to the side. So now we can get our overall width. So with these panels, we have 29 7/16. So I'm just going to jot this down, 29 7/16. I did cut the stiles of the face frame already, because what I did this morning was I cut these panels to their overall height. And when I did that, I went ahead and I cut all 8 pieces of these face frame stiles because they want to end up the same height as these panels. So whenever you're making repetitive cuts, if you have multiple parts that are the same size, it's a good idea to cut them all at the same time. So I have my stiles over here. It's these. So these are 3 inches by 1 inch. You could see we have like a flat sawn edge there and a quarter sawn edge there, or rift sawn. I'm going to want to put this to the inside because you can see when this gets glued up, this flat sawn grain, it's going to be more of a grain match than this. Wait a minute, did I just flip that? Sorry. I flipped it and it was the same side. This quartered grain with all this Rayfleck, it doesn't really match up with this style. So I'm going to want to make sure. I just did it again.
There it is.
My 12 o'clock coffee is just kicking in. So you can see, that's pretty good. Even if I went like this, it would probably be better. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set them up here, sort of in the orientation that they're going to go as I prepare to build this face frame. You can see more straight grain here, more of a quartered grain here. So this one's going to go here. I'll put it up there like that so that I know that that's where these go. The next step, we have our overall, which is 29 and 7/16. So we want this face frame to be 29 and 7/16. If we look here at, let's say this one. So this is how the face frames are built. So if our overall is 29 and 7/16, we need to figure out what this dimension is for these two rails. So you could do the math. You could say, okay, this is 3, that's 6. Take the overall, subtract 6. The way that I prefer to do it is I'll take my two stiles and I'll butt them together. I think we might have talked about this in the solid pine door video. So we have 29 and 7/16. I'll take my tape and I'll put 29 and 7/16 over here. So you can see that I have these two pieces stacked up and I have my tape at 29 and 7/16. If I look over here, I have 23 and 7/16. So this is pretty easy math. These are actually 3 inches. So if they were, you know, a 32nd off, the math doesn't really, it's not as easy. It's not an even 6. So it's a good way, 23 and 7/16. To figure that out without doing the math. You might make a mistake if you do math, so it makes it easy that way. So we have our two stiles, and we'll grab our rails. We're ready to cross-cut those two rails now. So I'm referencing my cut sheet here. We're looking for parts Q and parts R. So come over here to our pile of lumber. Here's Q. So this is our bottom rail. That's 6 inches wide. And R should be the same length, but it'll be 3 inches wide. And that's right here. You can see we have a lot more parts to go through on this job. So our top rail at 3 inches wide, our bottom rail at 6 inches wide. We're here at the saw stop with the crosscut sliding attachment, and we're cutting our pieces to 23 and 7/16. So we'll set our stop here. I just feel like I have to close one eye to get this dialed in. So I'll turn on dust collection. I'm going to square up one end. And then I'll flip my piece around, drop the stop, and cut it to length. Get my safety glasses. So we have both rails cut. What I like to do now is actually lay everything out, take a look at it before we start cutting the joinery, which in this case, believe it or not, is pocket screws. So we use pocket screws in our face frames. We don't use dominoes or biscuits. We just don't think that you need them. And especially with 5/4 material and nice, large rails and styles like this, we have a big glue surface and a couple of pocket screws. It's going to be really strong, especially when it's connected to the cabinet. So we'll take this over to the table, lay it out, and we can cut some pocket holes. The pocket hole machine will be the next tool that we use. But first, what I want to do is actually lay this out. So we have our two styles. Remember, we have that more straight grain facing out. And now's a good time to see, you know, which way you want these to face. Honestly, I want this to be pointing up. Like that. This is sort of going up. And I think that'll look nice there. And our bottom rail. Want to hide that sap in the back. So this is how we're going to put together our face frame. Now we're going to use the Porter cable. It's called a production pocket cutter, which they do not make anymore, unfortunately. And if you're going to mark your pieces for the pocket holes, you need to mark the top. So I've done this several times now. I know that I want one at 2.5 and 5 from the bottom on this bottom rail. And I have some marks on the machine that I can use to get them on this top rail. Here's our pocket hole machine. Like I said, Porter cable production pocket cutter. If you've ever seen a Castle, I think it's a TSM 12. It's basically the same machine. They're still making those Castle, but they don't make these anymore. So it has two routers on the inside. When you push forward, there's a 3/8 inch bit that's going to cut a pocket. So we'll cut that first, and then we'll pull forward, and there's a 9/64 inch pilot hole. So that's on a little palm router, and this 3/8 bit is on like a 1.25 horsepower, you know, regular 1/2 inch collet type router. This is very loud and a little dusty, so I'll kick it on and cut these holes. We can take a look at what they look like. So you have a little clamp here. We have all the pocket hole joinery cut now. So I like to leave it oriented the way that I want it to be glued up. And then what I'll actually do is I'll flip everything over. And don't forget, I can't just flip these over. I need to actually flip this over and put it over here, and flip this over and put it over here. You know, like we were taking the whole thing as one piece and flipping it over. I always like to start in the corner here. So what we're going to do is we're going to apply glue to the end grain. We're going to, you know, get this set where we need it. We'll clamp it off, and we'll run in 2 pocket screws. These are number 7 by 1.5 inches with a fine thread. These are what we use on our face frames and when we're joining hardwood, as opposed to like a number 8 by 1.25 inches is what we would use in plywood. So we're using Titebond 3 for this. Mostly, well, Titebond 3 is the glue that I like to use personally, and for white oak it has the right color. You don't need a fancy glue brush for this. And get it, you know, as flush as you can right now. Take one of these big clamps. This was like a top 3 in our clamp video. And I want to get good pressure so that this joint is flush. You're going to be able to sand out any inconsistencies, but it does take a lot of time to sand this white oak flush, so if you want the face to be, you know, as flush as possible. So I'm flush here. Could maybe tap this in just a hair.
You're referencing off of this work table, though. This table has to be nice and smooth.
Yeah.
Because the face is what you're going to see.
Right. So if there's any like dried bits of glue like this, or sometimes you cut metal in the shop and there's metal embedded into the table, you're going to clamp this thing down onto whatever's on this table. So make sure that you're doing that on a clean spot. So take 2 of my screws. It's a number 2 square drive. Now these pocket holes, you may notice, look a lot different than, say, like a Craig jig. These are at a really low angle, so they're actually, the slot is longer and it's at a lower angle, so you get more of a straight connection versus a Craig jig. This is an instance where I keep a wet rag around. I'll clean up some of this glue. White oak, glue will really get into the grain. If you let it dry in there, it's, you have to sand it way out. This is going to pop the grain a little bit because it's water, but we're going to sand all this anyway, so I'm not really too worried about it. I like to use a drill when I'm doing these pocket screws. The impact, I've actually broken some screws off in hardwood before. So here we have a completed frame. This one's all sanded, and we cut this detail into the toe. So the fronts of all these cabinets have this cutout detail. The face frames are finished now, so the next step would be to build the doors. So if you tune into the next episode, we'll be showing you how to measure, cut, and assemble the doors.
Okay, well, I hope you enjoyed this episode on today's Craftsman. If you want to see the follow-up episode, head on over to today's Craftsman channel. We'll have a link right here. And while you're there, I hope that you'll subscribe and check out some of the other videos. Again, thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you next time.